Hello everyone, I guess hopefully you're having a wonderful day. We are back again with another PWCC weekly review where I go through the top 100 soccer items auctioned off this week, give you my thoughts on them, what I'm thinking. Also would love to hear yours down below in a comment as usual. If you enjoy the video, do make sure to leave a like, but with that said, let's get into it. So as we do, we'll start from the bottom and work our way up, this week starting with a Topps Museum framed auto of Vinny Jr. from the 2022-23 year. Typically, the earlier the year, the better. Like with most things, I remember in 2018, I'm pretty sure these were case hits and all of them were numbered much lower, but now, the numbers ramp higher, and so we have out of 99s. I'm going to assume they're still case hits, but I do like the framed border. I think it looks nice. It also feels really good, which is important whenever you have a card in hand. But yeah, that goes for 170. Next, we have a Falcao at 2018 Eminence. We have this 2003 Cristiano Ronaldo, which I don't think I've ever seen before. That goes for 174. Pop 1 of 1. Somewhat recently graded, but not too recent. Above that, we have another framed auto here from Xabi Alonso. We have this 85 Panini Maradona PSA 9, which felt like a decent price. PSA 9 1980s Maradonas don't go for too cheap, so 174 is seems like a steal, at least I'll say it that way, but you never really know. Ultimately, there's probably a lot of stickers out there, so is getting a 9 that hard? We'll have to find out. I like the design, though. The Sindelar Bulgaria, I think I looked it up just because I was interested. I did. PSA 7, this is actually a really good price. The last ones did 174 for this one, 100, 102, and 80. So comparatively to those, that is a mighty fine price. Definitely not the earliest Sindelar, but one of the earlier ones that you can get in high grade, so it is desirable in that sense. Above that, this Treble McKinney goes for 180. I was interested in that just because, to me, that seemed kind of high. Apparently, last sale was 150, and then a PSA 9 in May of last year did 82, so based off of what I'm seeing there, pretty high price, I would say so. For me, as someone that likes USMNT players, typically I'm going to prefer them in USMNT kits where I can. 2018, you have Optic, and that's in the USMNT kit with the rated rookie on it. I much prefer those compared to the treble set, but ultimately I do understand some people like the treble set, and there's going to be some buyers for this. Also, color match works in its favor. We have a Topps Chrome Stars Mbappe along with an 83 Diego Maradona Este. Not a crazy price here, but this one actually was decent compared to last comps. I think 5s have been going for near about 100, so a 6 at 200 isn't too bad. Above that in this row, we have a few odd and ends of modern. Nothing all too much to talk about. This Darwin auto, making Erling Haaland autos look somewhat comparable. For this Di Maria, we have a stained glass that goes for nearly 200. I was interested. I'm like, what Di Marias even go for 200? Because I feel like I never see any on PWCC, but of course there are cards, tons of cards that sell off PWCC. And so, yeah, basically Lionel Messi paired up autos are going to do, quite a number. And then really the highest one here is a 1 of 1. There's this out of 10 auto that goes for 300. So few and far in between. Personally, I'd prefer, like, say, a gold prism. Compare to the stained glass, I don't really think that's too close, but yeah, ultimately, from what I can tell, other than like autos and really low numbers, there's not too much that goes near that, so stained glass, certainly getting a premium there. Up in this row, we have a 2019 Kylian Mbappe gold refractor going for 186. This PSA 7 Cristiano Ronaldo goes for 200. I did look up comps on that just because I remembered a 9 recently going for about 500, which is what we got right there, so compared to that, it seems like a pretty strong price for a 7. In this row, we have a second-year Cantona, a second-year Christian Pulisic auto, and a FIFA 2001-2002 Zlatan Ibrahimovic. This was one that I did look up, but I ended up closing apparently, so I'm not going to go back and look it up. But basically, I'll tell you that whenever these first were coming out and getting graded and sold, there were PSA 3s that would go for around this price, if not higher. So they definitely have come down since then. However, it seemed like a pretty stable price compared to what's been happening lately. But just generally speaking, it's another warning. Whenever you see something for the first time and you really want it, just wait a little bit and you'll probably be able to get a grade or two higher as time goes on. Of course, as we go further and further along the timeline, that's going to become less and less prominent, but it is still something to think about. In this row, nothing too shocking. We have a 60s Pele. We have the Super Sport Panini Diego Maradona that you see quite a bit. This PSA 10 Erling Haaland. I will say I like the prize footballers a lot, mostly for the border. I like the nice plain border on the 2019 Haaland, but that's just me. This row we have a treble cream Benzema purple that goes for 210. We have a Thomas Muller that goes for 210 as well in a PSA 10, and then a second year Roberto Baggio. We'll compare this Muller to the Muller above it. This one goes for 228. Personally, I'd much rather have the portrait shot. I think that it's just a nicer looking one. It also has Thomas Muller's name down the side, which this one doesn't. So to me, I think the portrait's much better, but There are sort of a few different options, and we'll see another one later on in this auction. This seems pretty crazy to me that a Topps UCL Crystal's going for more than the prize footballers. Personally, I'd much prefer prize footballers to the Crystal, but yeah, I don't know what that's about. I mean, the Crystal cards to me always just seem really low quality and kind of terrible, I thought, but doesn't seem to be that way. At least, I mean, maybe a PSA 10 just hard to grade. I'm not quite sure, but that's interesting. PSA 6 Diego Maradona goes for $228. Looked up some comps on this and seemed, relatively fair. Hard to pick out the Panini World Cup ones, but you can see a 4 there on auction, went for $300. That's pretty high. A 5 here on auction did $123, so that's probably more of a reasonable comp. That was last year in September. A 6 now goes for double the price, and so that seems fair. Above that, nice mix and match in this row. We have a blue Luka Modric treble that goes for $234. We have a Christian Pulisic bronze breakaway and a Stevie G PSA 8 of the update transfer from the 98-99 Merlin. In this row, I will say, with Luka Modric, I've heard a lot of rumblings throughout the hobby lately of people being like, oh, I think he's the third best player of this generation. And personally, it might be true. It might. I don't know. There's kind of a lot of players you can throw into there. I think that for most anyone that lived through it, though, Neymar's probably going to be the third one that speaks out to you because of sort of his style, being on Barca, being a big name, being that flashy the way he was. I just think that all sort of culminates to more than whatever the accolades that Modric has means. I know you can point to awards and this, that, and the other as to why Modric is better, but at the end of the day, go back in time and look at sort of the hobby darlings. Rarely ever do midfielders get the true love and desire they probably should. And, speaking to that, like, say, a Casemiro or Toni Kroos, I mean, those might not be Modric level. You might say they're a little bit below him, but ultimately I never hear anyone talk about them. And that's sort of the point is, while he might be seen as the third now, it's very quick between how the hobby can think you're the best thing ever or not care about you at all. And so, I do worry about that a little bit. I guess I don't worry about it because I don't really own much Luka Modric, but I think about it a lot, considering I think about soccer cards way too much. That is part of it. This breakaway Pulisic, I really like the Prism card here. I think it's pretty important in terms of Pulisic's career, U.S. soccer, all that jazz. But I guess if I was going to go after it, probably not a bronze breakaway for me, but, I'd be pretty particular with what I wanted. The Stevie G seems like a pretty decent price. 2023 went for $250, or I guess beginning of 2024 went for $200, and now goes for $240 as well. Above that, we have an Iniesta PSA 9 that goes for $250. I looked that up because I was interested. And basically, this has gone up a good bit. It did seem to bottom out for maybe $100 here, 91 on eBay, which is just crazy. And now back up to like $250. So to me, what I always think of whenever I look at these prices is I compare them to Messi. I know a Messi PSA 9 goes for about probably $1,500 to $2,000. So, it seems to make sense. Typically in my head, whenever I go from a superstar to a star, I usually go a tenth of the price is sort of the ratcheting down. So for me, this still seems a little high. I felt like maybe 100 to 200 range was fair. But maybe Messi's are just low, or, I don't know what it is exactly. But to me, I'm pretty surprised that these have run the way they have. But, I'm not disappointed, I guess. Then we have a Kylian Mbappe prize footballer fusion. We have this PSA 9 Buffon that goes for $260. Above that, we have a nice mix and match here. A 1/1 Pepe, a early Romario, late 80s Romario that you can find in the Voetbal that goes for $276 on PSA 9, pop 1 of 2, just 2 higher. And then we have a Platini from 76-77 that goes for $276. Next row is a good bit of Messi. We have a PSA 8 2006 and a PSA 6 2004, along with a field level PSA 10 of Lewandowski. The field levels seem to have been getting a lot of love lately, especially, of course, in high grade. PSA 10 here is going to help it out a little bit, but again, a lot of them, at least to me, seem relatively high when you compare them to sort of the big stars. Messi and Ronaldo, of course, they do good prices, but I don't think that they do the multiplier you typically expect, which to me says that there's a lot of people sort of collecting the set itself and going after some of the players rather than just the big stars, which is both a good thing to see but a bad thing to see depending on which angle you want to take it from. In this row, we have a couple R9s, so you have a 5.5 here and a 4 there. Ultimately, they do basically the same price because people like centered cards much more than non-centered, despite being a grade and a half difference. And, I sort of understand that. At the end of the day, especially when PSA, they don't tell you what's wrong with the card or sticker, so ultimately you can just look at it and be like, oh, it looks pretty good, and just go on with your day. So you don't really have to know what's wrong with it, I guess. Personally, I'm almost always going to go a couple grades higher or a grade and a half higher if I can, even if it's off-center. I don't have that sort of OCD nature, at least with the centering of cards that other people seem to. The Xavi goes for 300. The Xavi Monday Cromos have much followed the Iniestas, so this is also a pretty good price compared to where they've been. You know, always interested in what the Muller and the Beckenbauers look like, because I think that's important. It's always good to call out the few cards in particular that for some reason PSA just has graded on quite a spectrum. So first off, whatever this is, I mean, I know there's like Newton rings inside the slabs at times, but I don't think that's what this is. This just looks like a discolored blotch of maybe some sort of removal. I don't know. But when you look at the back, I mean, this isn't even close. Like, some of them are really, really well removed to the point where it's almost hard to even tell. This one, I don't even know what the question in doubt is. I mean, there's basically no E. This, you can definitely tell smudged with color. You know, it's just not even close. So, again, just the inconsistency on grading. If you want to call this a 5, great. They probably should do that all the time. Personally, I don't think that this is a 5, but whatever. Back in the day, though, basically anytime this sort of thing happened, it's an automatic 1 or 2, and now it's almost like they don't even grade it, which is just so strange, but it's something we gotta, you know, sort through ourselves here in soccer. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I'd be interested in your thoughts down below. We'll see a Beckenbauer that's like that later. I don't think it's as egregious, but it's close. Treble Lewandowski goes for 312 there. Above that, we have an Alifa. We have an Alifa Garincha. We have a Pele 69 Victoria and a Pulisic auto that's out of 99 that I do believe got re-ran. It still goes for a decent number, but we'll see if it gets paid ultimately. Then we have a framed auto here of Beckenbauer out of 99 that goes for 336. Again, you know, just a warning about autos. I always feel like this is important. Framed autos, at least, again, to me, I think they're pretty cool, and they typically command somewhat of a premium, and so this is a card that commands somewhat of a premium of a top 10 player of all time that sadly now is no longer with us, but it's a signed sticker autograph, that is. And so, you know, it gets $300, which ultimately in the landscape of modern is not very much. There are tons of cards that people are paying $300 for, of tons of players that will never amount to anywhere near close to what Beckenbauer's done, which is always something to be considered. Not in the sense that you got to go and buy Beckenbauer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, maybe hold up on buying the new hot young guy that, you know, just had his new sticker autos released and all that jazz. We've seen that play out a lot, and, you know, we'll see it play out certainly a lot more going forward, but, you know, just like to do my part here. PSA 6 Campeon Messi goes for 336, a pretty decent price for a 6, especially, I mean, you can kind of tell in the top border that's chewed up. And then we on the row with a PSA 9 Beckenbauer that does 336, pop 1 of 1. In this row, an Mbappe rookie, a Pulisic rookie. I'm always surprised by what those golds do, considering they're unnumbered, but that does 372. Here we have a red and blue back of Garincha from 1970. I was sort of interested in what these do. I went to look up comps prior, and there's really not a lot of comps for blue-red back of 1970, so really it's all just guesswork, but 372 for that one is a pretty decent price. We have a Xavi Simons out of 50 here going for 384, next to a Vecchi Garincha PSA 1 that does 384, top 30% IPO. I thought it looked pretty good. You know, still kicking myself over missing the one on eBay that went for like $200 a couple weeks ago, but this one goes for $400. I didn't think its colors were anywhere near as good as the one that sold for $200, so it felt like a strong price to me, but that also could be just certain things slip through the cracks on eBay that might not on PWCC, and so I feel like those things typically will do better on PWCC. There are things that are totally the opposite where they do better on eBay, and so you really have to sort of think for that on your own and sort of come up with those decisions by yourself, but yeah, $400 is not a bad price. There's a PSA 2 later, we'll see. In this row, SGC 4 San Giorgio Pele goes for $400. There's been a good amount of these selling lately. I really do enjoy it, and I need to get one into the PC, but SGC 4, I'll leave that to some of the bigger fish. This PSA 10, Thomas Muller, I was going to say earlier, I don't think I like this more than the portrait shot, but sort of the key distinction is that with the portrait, you risk yourself much more to fakes. I feel like with this type of foil design that Panini did here, it's probably much more protected from possible fakes in the future. So that probably plays a factor. Also, anything foil, just in people's perspective nowadays, is better. So I can see why that sort of gets a good premium there at $420. Above that, we have a Panini Mejores Equipos de Europa, PSA 9 of R9 going for 420. A Bremer Fakring Pele PSA 2 going for 420, and then we have a Jude White Sparkle. I felt like this is a pretty good comparison with the card we'll see above it, which is a Mbappe Red Flood. Interested in that. I mean, again, modern, especially ultra modern's not exactly my thing. But between these two, I think I'd rather have the Red Flood. To me, the floods in Obsidian are something that stands out. And so I sort of want something like that. If I'm going to collect a modern set, I want something that just clear cut stands out to me. This Jude, I know it's White Sparkle, and those are kind of something, but from what I understand, White Sparkle come from White Sparkle packs, which are sort of a make good from Panini. I don't really personally like make goods. I want them to be, distributed in sets and all that jazz. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but at least that's my perception of things. Nonetheless, even if it was in packs, I mean, from the Qatar World Cup, I'd rather have gold out of 10, give me the out of 5s, 1 of 1s, all that jazz. And then also the out of 22 that's maroon. I like that one too. So personally, there's a lot of other ones I'd prefer, while with Mbappe floods just stand out immediately. So to me, the Mbappe flood, but to each their own. I'd be interested in what others think. We have this hand-cut Zinedine Zidane that goes for 456. That feels pretty high. I didn't look up comps on that, but that doesn't look very well hand-cut, and yeah, that just feels pretty hefty. This PSA 6 Vanderhoot Cruyff, I looked on the back, it also looked removed. So again, PSA just apparently not looking at the backs of cards, or maybe they don't care, I don't know anymore. Nonetheless, we've sort of come to expect that. We have a Beam Team Erling Haaland Gold going for 588, a PSA 8 Messi Rookie going for nearly 600. These have come up a good bit. I mean, at one point they were drifting into the mid-4s, and now, almost hitting 600 there isn't too shabby. This George Weah at 660s, down a good bit. I've seen 9s of this definitely in the past go for near about 1,000, so this is down a fair bit. Also, to be fair, in the past, I don't think it was a pop 1 of 8, 1 higher. Obviously, pops go up, but I think that one's went up pretty well. We have a 70 World Cup blue and red back Pele PSA 1 going for 660. Interesting to be able to get a low grade comp on that. I know we saw, I think it was a PSA 6 or some really high grade of that go recently, but PSA 1 for 660. This is the rarest of the 1970s. If memory serves correct, I think that these are the stickers released within like Panini booklets, so it's sort of like the extra stickers that you could get on, whenever you start up your World Cup collecting adventures. So that's pretty cool. Obviously not easy to find. PSA 8 Vinny Jr. goes for 690. I think I looked that up. Typically for rookies, I'm much more interested because I know those have some pretty decent demand, especially the Vinny. That's sort of one of the chases of the set. So yeah, this one goes for 690. Prior did 458 and then 630 before it. Didn't even play on this, but it appears that it got reran. I'm not quite sure. At least, being bought and then sold a month and a half later on PWCC seems to indicate that to me, especially with the treble set where we see that a lot. I'll be interested if that gets bought or not, because again, this sells for higher than the last price, 10% higher. It did sell for less than the eBay comp, so I get that too, but ultimately that's part of the trouble I have with treble itself, is when half the time I go and check comps, I'm finding, either one or multiple relists of something that isn't supposed to sell that often. Just makes me extremely weary and doesn't make me feel good as an outsider looking in, but that's just how I feel about it. I'll make a video more about why I hate modern, quote unquote, in a video this week, so we'll have that out for you. But ultimately, all the things I say in this video and in this series, they're my opinions. They're just the way I view the hobby. I'm one collector just doing my thing. So if you feel differently or if you disagree, that's great. I mean, I'm glad. I wouldn't want us all to be thinking the same thing and doing the same thing and, just talking back and forth in the comments about the same exact thing. I don't like that. So ultimately, I'm glad other people enjoy things. I don't want everyone to take my opinions as gospel, because they shouldn't. That's just very silly. And in the world of collecting, it's a vast landscape. So rarely ever are people going to agree on everything. Nonetheless, keeping it moving. I do like this 62 Vecchi. Always sort of shout this out for the borders. The flags on the side are pretty iconic in my opinion, and I love the colors as well. This Pele looks pretty good. This Titularis PSA 6 Garincha did pretty good numbers early on in the auction. I think it was lingering around like 200 to 300 pretty late in the day on Sunday there, and I was moderately interested. I went back and looked at like pre-boom pricing, and I think a 5 might have went for like 100, close to that, something around that price. So I felt like it was fair. 720 is quite the boost, so that's a pretty decent price. Also really good grade, so I get it. We have the 73 Pele going for 750 between, and then we have this Beckenbauer in a 5 going for 750 also. Took a peek at this, and yeah, I guess it wasn't as egregious as the Gerd Muller, but sort of within the Beckenbauer at the top of his name, you can sort of see some paper loss, I would presume, and sort of down here through the middle right side of the card itself. Again, I think you can see paper loss, but PSA still gives it a 5, so, ultimately that's the state of new grading. We have the 55 Vinci Grinch I mentioned earlier in a 2 going for 750. You can tell the top's pretty beaten up and the back's sort of stained as well, but I can understand that generally it looks pretty good for a 2. Soccer's always difficult because 1s and 2s can look so good despite deserving 1 or 2 as their grade, so it's just tricky. This Figo 1992-93 goes for a pretty good price. I think this was near about an all-time high, so 780 there. PSA 8 did 1200, but for the grade, 780 was a really good price, and if we go back, it's never really dropped, mostly due to it not being graded that heavily. We have a 2017 variation Messi going for near about 900. This 1934 Vecchi Miazza, this goes for 900, which, at least in the vintage Discord, check that out down below if you haven't already. Great place to, hang out, chat some vintage soccer. They were talking about how it was a high sale, and I would guess probably because it's chilled. I don't know, but apparently this got sold a month prior, and upon being reran, sold for 4 to 5 times the price. So yeah, typically that's not going to be the case. I'd be interested if, maybe anyone comes forward as a buyer. But yeah, that's one I would just sort of stash away and forget about. This 96 Europa Thierry Henry goes for 1,020. This was a pretty fine price. I mean, again, this was one that was pretty cheap late in the day, but ended up going really, really high. Last PSA 8 did 630. Before that, 750 in April of last year. So yeah, this is as high of a price as we've seen in probably, year and a half, 2 years almost. So pretty mighty fine price there. This altered Lionel Messi Mega Crack 71 Bis goes for over 1,000, which is pretty impressive to me. I mean, typically the low grades go over 1,000, but altered, I was interested. I did look at it. I mean, it looks pretty good, right? But you would expect an altered one to look pretty good. Nonetheless, still gets a decent number. Nearly the same price as a Rafael 1 of 1 here. 1 of 1s obviously are always going to have their own sort of separate market. I never go into watching an American on a new team with the perspective of saying I hate certain players or I love certain players. Usually I'd like to feel like I'm pretty unbiased where, maybe most of the players I won't care about, but then I'll have a few that either rub me the right way or the wrong way. And Leao has been probably on my bad side, I would say. Just generally speaking, I see the flashes of what people get excited about, right? Because it is there. And lately he's been better than he has been all season, so it's even more prominent. But when it comes to consistency, he is far from consistent. He'll have games where he's on, games where he's off. He'll have games where he looks like he doesn't even want to be there. He looks like he's not even participating in the game itself. And so, whenever you see that, just from an effort standpoint, it's pretty disappointing. I also feel like sometimes he's pretty selfish, which if you are a great player is a good attribute. But if you're a player that's sort of hit or miss and sometimes not even cooperating with your team, I feel like that's probably not the best route. So, some people are excited about him. Personally, I'm not really. There are other players on the team that have really impressed me in a good way, like a Dejani Reinders. I don't think he's some world beater, but compared to what I would have expected, I thought he was really, really impressive in terms of now just watching AC Milan sort of getting into the team, compared to, basically no one probably even knowing his name really. But, I get it. 1 of 1, especially of a prospect, are always going to do crazy numbers, so that's why we see that. This Flashes Do Football Pele goes for 1,200, same price as the Leao. This is Pop 1 of 6.6 higher. Look back at comps, but this was generally in the range. I think a PSA 4 prior had done the same price, so it does seem to be a little bit of a dip. Really, in my opinion, one of the best looking 60s Pelés, I would say. I love the blue in the background along with the net as well. The orange, it just all collides pretty well here on this card. So 1,200 there doesn't seem too bad. We also have a Bisfalita back PSA 7 from the 1970 World Cup for going $100 higher. We have a PSA 9 Roberto Carlos that did 1,300 here. I look back at past sales and we'll just, I'll skip by it and won't waste your time. But basically last year they were doing about 3,000 to 3,500 on a few different comps. There was also a comp that did 1,500. So to me, what that kind of shows is I don't know if the $3,500 comps were shilled, or if maybe the $1,500 comp on eBay was just too low and people didn't see it. I don't know. But typically, whenever PWCC prices are doing really high, and then there's an eBay sale that just falls through the cracks really low, I would imagine that the market eventually is going to lean more towards the eBay comp, which seems to be what's happened here, because this has fallen pretty substantially. I will say it always seemed weird to me that, I get it, Roberto Carlos, great player, all that jazz, but rarely do cards do 3,000 to 4,000 in soccer, especially of just Panini stickers, right? That's a big rarity, at least at this point in time, and in 2023. And so to have, a right back doing that, it did seem a little crazy. I get why it's come back down, and at 1,200, it's a bit more approachable, I would say. $3,000 to $4,000 nowadays almost gets you to the top of most PWCC auctions, so I don't know if, Roberto Carlos warrants that, but this seems much more fair, and, I kind of get why it's done what it's done. We have a Lionel Messi blue treble that did 1,400 here. PSA 8, not going to be the best grade, but treble doesn't grade that well, so, not outside of the range of what you'd expect. We have a PSA 7 Thierry Henry here that we can look at a chart for. So basically this has gone down quite a bit over the last 2 years. But I guess if we take out that 2022 sale and we look at, say, March of 2023, it looks like it's performing pretty well, or at least decent compared to that. So, you can pick what you want. Ultimately, what's notable to me is that it's a pop 4 and there are 5 prices here listed in just the last couple of years. So what that tells me is, while it is a low pop item, there are still, a decent amount of people selling it despite, wanting to own it for the time being. Whatever reason, it seems like they turn around and sell it moderately quickly. Pop 4 also just seems really low, but, at the same time, you don't see a lot of French Panini foot, so it makes sense. I thought this was really weird. Cristiano Ronaldo treble, 1 grade higher, selling for higher than the Messi. Most people, I think it makes sense, would attribute that to being a grade higher, and that thus it's going to sell, a good premium higher. But on the other hand, it is, Juve kit Ronaldo, which to me would be one of the least meaningful of the kit Ronaldos that you could go for. So I feel like that's a, pretty good result in the Ronaldo favor. I know a lot of people have said Messi's going to take the mantle, he's going to be the guy, and Ronaldo's basically going to be an afterthought. I've always sort of stuck the opposite way, where I think those two are inextricably linked for eternity. You can say one was better than the other, but ultimately, when you have to say one was better than the other, that means that there are people saying the other thing, and that means that they are comparable, right? And I think that's important. A lot of people wanted to say, and still might want to say, that Lionel Messi is the Jordan of soccer. I don't think that could be further from the truth. I think that people that say that don't understand what Jordan did for basketball. Jordan was really what put basketball on a pedestal above everything else. And there was no one comparable to Jordan for that era. I've never heard anyone compare anyone to Jordan from the 90s. Like, no one ever says, oh, but this guy was better. You never hear it. Never, not once. And he grew that sport to a whole new level when basketball was really kind of going through a hard time prior. And, soccer is so much more established, with so many more stars throughout history, with so much more going on. It's such a reductionist view to say that Messi is Jordan, and it's always irked me. But that's a small win for, Team Ronaldo, so I'll take it. 62 Nina Pele here goes for 1,500 in a PSA 4. We have a Franco Baresi PSA 9 that does 1,500. I was interested in that, just because you don't see PSA 9s of Baresi come up very often. So last one did 960, so compared to that, up 60%. This is an eye appeal sticker, so that plays a factor. Before that, 1,600 on a fixed price, 1,300 on an auction. And if you go all the way back, 2,000-ish during the high times, but ultimately not too far of a dip for Baresi there, which is pretty good. We have this Torres De Stefano that I did take a look at on comps, and basically this was a really good price. There have been, I think, another PSA 5 and a PSA 6 that both sold lower than this one, so this is a mighty fine price. When I look back, the 2019 sale of a PSA or an SGC 2.5 was like $100. So compared to pre-boom, this thing is up just astronomically. I think, partially deserved. When it comes to 1953 De Stefanos, really hard to, make sense of which one is a good one, right? There are a lot of them, and so it's sort of hard to figure out what's the one. But, in terms of aesthetics, I would say this has to be up near the top, if not the top, so I understand why people have sort of flooded to it. It's not that common, so, I get why it does a big price. always scares me a little bit as a potential buyer when I see something go up that much from pre-boom to now, because I know that there are other great cards that are at pre-boom pricing despite not being severely high pop. But yeah, to me, look like a good price. Next to we have an Mbappe treble here that does 2,000. I looked at comps on that, and that's about where they've been going, maybe a little higher than recent comps. I could sort of imagine that given the relative bump we've been seeing in a lot of things, plus him having, I guess, improved rumors of going to Madrid, but that happens every year. So, at this point in the year, it says he's going, so everyone's excited. This PSA 3 Pele gets a $3,000 price tag on it. To me, this looked really good as a 3. I mean, just scrolling through the auction, that immediately popped out, so I get why it has a 15% eye appeal sticker, and $3,000 seems like a good price. They have been dipping a little bit in the past, but that seems to be about where they are. Close to 1,000 per grade is about the range I've been seeing. Breaking into the top 3, we have an Optic Gold Messi to start us off at 4,300. I was interested in this. I don't really look at these types of cards that often, so I didn't know what to expect. Apparently, last PSA 9 did 2,400, 2,200, and then a PSA 9 did 5,000 as well. So, comparatively, it does seem like it's went down a good bit. But again, that's always going to happen upon release, especially whenever PSA 9s are doing high numbers and no 10s have sold. Once a 10 comes out, it kind of crushes the 9s, and, a story as old as time itself. But yeah, a fun gold out of 10 Messi there. Next to it, we have a Qui Gold Pele that goes for $45.60. Last comp on that was a $37.20 sale on PWCC that had an eye appeal sticker as well. So this is, up maybe 20% on that sale, which isn't too shabby. I think this one looks pretty good. There's like a little hole in his forehead. Maybe that's a hole. I don't know. That looks a little weird, but generally speaking, it's a really nice looking sticker. This 3, while it did have an eye appeal, was pretty off-center. Great colors too, but to me, colors matter a lot, and this has some really good looks to it. And then finally, we have a green refractor Mbappe here out of 99 PSA 10 that goes for $7,500. Again, took a look at past sales just to sort of see. Last BGS 9 did 2,400. To me, 9 to 10 is typically a 3 times multiplier, so that's pretty much right on the nail. Scrolling back, the last PSA 10 we can find, I guess there's a tag gem mint that went for a little over 6,000. Card ladder's, struggling to work with me here, but we got there. Interesting to see a tag card. We don't see that all too often here in the comps. Last 10 though did 9,000, so down a little bit from that one. But ultimately, like most things, whenever I scroll back to the beginning, it always just puts it into perspective. So a raw green back in 2018 selling for $86. Obviously, Mbappe's, he's grown his stature since then, so I do understand why it's risen. But that's quite the rise to be certain, given, a 9 probably does 2,500 now, so a nice 30x or so, nothing too crazy. Ultimately, really good week. I thought top to bottom, again, I've been impressed both with the quality of cards that we've been seeing. There are some pretty good ones each and every week. On top of that, the prices have been pretty good. It seems like prices generally have started to go back up a bit depending on what you're looking at. Probably following, the greater trend of what's going on at large. Like most things, rising tide lifts all boats as it goes, and looking at next week, we'll see what we have. So highest price, this is a PSA 1 of Eusebio from the Francesa. We saw one of these go recently. I don't believe it's the same one, because I don't think the other one had an eye appeal sticker. We have a Kaboom Messi, which you don't see all too often, and a 10 that's already at 3,000 almost. And then this Alifa at 3,600 and a PSA 2 as well. So looks like we're going into another big week next week. We have a 7 here of a Mark van Basten. We have an 80i Pele, a 9.5 BGS Ronaldo. That one prior to being faked, so you would assume that one's real. And yeah, just scrolling through the rest, looking like another pretty good week as well. Excited to share it with you guys when the time comes. But that's going to be it for me today. As always, if you enjoyed the video, do make sure to leave a like. Helps me, helps the channel. If you want to see more videos like this as soon as we go live, make sure to subscribe. And as always, leave a thought, leave a comment down below on what your take was from the video. I always love hearing them. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.